last speaker in this session is Letecia Layson from the Philippines.
I feel so much better after that breathing and a little less nervous. Priestessing on the Edge of Chaos, Decolonization as Revelation to Matriarchal Spirituality. That's like a big thing, isn't it? So in 20 minutes, actually 19 minutes and 40 seconds and counting, I'm going to give you a brief look at what the Babaylan is like, but really, more importantly, I need to contextualize why I feel that I can actually speak to this issue as a woman who was actually born in the United States of America, who in many ways, when we speak about indigenous people, we're speaking about people who are land-based and based on the land of their ancestry. I am still land-based. I am still part of the family that has land that's farmed on my ancestral land in the Philippines. Every 10th harvest belongs to my family. As poor as there are many, I don't know if you know the economy of the Philippines, it's a very difficult time for them right now. So as long as my parents, as long as our family, as long as our family generations will live, our part of that harvest will go to the rest of our clan. So in a way, I am both a woman of modernity, a priestess in my own right, and I'll speak about that. And as Lenny Strobel says, we all can re-indigenize, to find our own roots, to go back to the primordial place of our ancestors. Those of us who are mixed blood, you have the option of meeting many ancestors with many different cultures to support everything that you need in this lifetime and everything that you need to support your family with those generations to come. The Babaylan's traditions are living traditions in the Philippines today. They've managed to exist through the 33 years of colonization with Spain and the 50 years of the colonization of the United States of America. To quote Jose Rizal, who is considered to be a hero during the Spanish-American times, without looking to the past, one cannot go forward into the future. And so as a woman who is raised in two cultures, as a second-generation Filipina, seeking to bridge those cultures in myself, I had to actually look backward, both into the Western culture in which I was raised, to the roots of the pre-patriarchal culture. For me, the Neolithic culture is much more akin to what my natural familial culture is like in the Philippines. So I also then had to look back at the roots of my Filipino culture pre-colonial. I'm going to talk about, briefly, the contemporary goddess culture that emerged out of second-wave feminism. And part of that is that I'm ordained in 3 goddess traditions. I began that journey about 18 years ago. In fact, Vicki Noble was the very first elder in the goddess movement that I had the privilege of actually attending a workshop with her. Unbeknownst to me, it was a healing workshop, which meant that I went with a large group of women, and Babaylans were healers. The word Babaylan is a Visayan word, which is a particular area in the Philippines. The Visayan Islands are a midway. For those of you who know about World War II, the Visayan Islands, the island of Leyte is actually where MacArthur landed. And that's actually where my mother is from. My mother is from Tacloban, Leyte. And that's in the Visayan group of the islands. My father is also from the Visayan Islands. He's from a place called Panay. Panay, and this place called Iloilo, is closer to the southern part of the Philippines, with the last large island being Mindanao. And most of you would know what Mindanao is. It's the place where the Muslims never actually converted to Christianity. So there are many theories about how the Filipino people came onto the islands. We know from our anthropological and our archaeological information in the Philippines that they have found evidence of humans there 40,000 years ago. So we know that our roots actually migrated out because our oldest people are called Igorots. That's one of the names. They have different tribal names. We have many tribes in the Philippines, like all lands around the planet, that patriarchy would have us want to simplify. As an example, we call all the Native people here Native Americans. But even amongst the Native Americans, there are many tribes and many languages. The same is true of the Philippines. There's about 135 languages. There's over 7,000 islands in the Philippines. So to contextualize that experience of a Filipino person, we were united always under colonizers. We were tribal people, and we actually had an egalitarian experience with all the tribes because language is really telling about a culture. And there are, I'll give you an example of a place and a culture in the Philippines. The island is called Palawan, and they have no word for war. Now, the Palawan people were living on their ancestral lands all the way up until 1947 in some of the villages that were taken away during to do commercial farming. So we have quite a bit of history of this ancient and future worlds converging in our islands. We actually have what would be considered Stone Age people, who actually are very tribal, Aboriginal people. I'll mention the Igorots again. Those are small pygmy people, under 4 feet tall, very much Negroid in their features. We also have a history of Malaysian people. So they believe that we came across from the Sea of China, walking across lands there. And we also have the oceanic experience, meaning that Polynesian, Micronesian, we are all part of the same chain of ancient history. The gift economy of Genevieve Vaughn and the matriarchal studies of Heidi contextualizes the Babaylan for Western cultural lenses and Western researchers to look inside the Filipino culture. It helps to be a bridge. I want to speak a little bit again about the language. In the Philippines, there's only one pronoun, which means that we are not split in our culture about males and females having human qualities, okay? Qualities are just qualities of people. So we are also considered bilateral sanguinity, which means that in our cultures, in many of the tribes, it's either the male or the female line that is dominant based on who's closer or what's evidential, because they're equal. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that two families are united to create a larger village. In my personal life, I can give you an example of that. I have a great-grandfather who had 7 wives. 5 of those wives had families, and those 5 wives each had other husbands. So they had other children from those fathers and from the same father, and all that family and all those children continue to gather today. We have what would be like a shtetl. We have an area in our community in the Philippines where there are family clan homes. And the family system is just very different. So there's a conundrum when I try to speak about the culture that has, it doesn't matter whether or not it's a man or a woman. And that comes from our cosmology, our creation stories. The creation story from the Visayan Islands, one of them is, the most commonly known one is about the origination of the first male and female called Maganda and Malakas. And there was this great bird that was flying around, and he was very tired, and the heaven and the waters were actually having a fight while this bird is flying around, and he's very hungry. The bird is hungry. Since there's only one pronoun, we really don't know. It's just a bird. It's not male or female, it's a bird. The bird is flying around, so asks if there could be land. Up pops land because it's tired, and it starts to peck on the bamboo. And out jumps the first fully formed female and male. The female is called Maganda, which means beauty, and the male is called Malakas, which means strength. So in the cultures of the Philippines, we cultivate strength and beauty. We don't cultivate mothers and fathers. We cultivate strength and beauty for everyone. I have 9 minutes, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the goddess religion, because it has bearing on why the Babaylan is present in my life. There's something that's called tacit knowledge. I like to think of tacit knowledge as ancestral memes. Tacit knowledge is the sort of cultural memory, sort of cultural collective consciousness. I was born and raised in the United States. I had no real connection to the Philippines. I was there for the first time in 1974. I was raised in a Catholic home. I had a teacher who came to me when I was in high school. Meditation teacher came to my youth club. It was a woman, and I worked with her for a couple of years, did meditation, and told me that I needed to come to LA to finish my spiritual practices and my teaching, because the world would be changing and I would need to be prepared to help people as the world was making these rapid changes and life on the planet was being drastically changed. The Babaylan herself is a woman who actually communes with spirit. She's a woman who dances the world into being. She dances herself to wholeness. She dances for healing. She dances for the harvest. She dances for prayer. There is no thing that is not goddess, which is what is said in the goddess religions. The same is true in the Filipino traditions. Everything has life. Indigenous people believe that everything is life. So even as I'm speaking here, I do not need to say to goddess or to God or to deity that I offer this to you, because every day my life is offered in that way. Priestessing on the edge of chaos means that I am actually walking the edge, this fine edge of recognizing that the decolonization of my psyche and all of us is critical and vital to the survival of this planet. What do I mean by that? Every single one of us has been touched by colonization, either as a colonizer or to be colonized. And the second wave that came back was globalization. So in the wake of colonization, while the powers are still holding on, globalization is sending migrations of people and destabilizing families by sending and taking away family structures and family systems. So where my cousin, my first cousin, came to the United States as a nurse, she did not see her children growing up except for perhaps once a year, because she could not find a job in the Philippines. This happens all over the planet. What I found out was not only does my father come from a large family and my mother come from a large family, one year when I was traveling home to visit my father, I had this vision. I was driving into the sunrise, and I saw this cloud that looked like this woman. And out of her became another woman, fractally repeating this aspect of woman, woman, woman. Because I had this experience as a single woman, wondering, am I going to have children? Because it had been foretold that I'd have 2 girls. And I was very worried that I wouldn't have girls, and I wouldn't have children. So when I got home, I asked my dad about this thing about, all these different women. And I realized, oh, in my family, I actually have a blood relative that is at least once or twice removed from me on every landmass around the globe. Now, how many people can say that, really? And not only that, some of those people know my stories better than I know my own stories, because my mother wrote our stories as an archivist and sent them all over to these people for 60 years. So when they meet me for the first time, some of these people were born way after my mother left the Philippines. They'll tell me a story about my childhood. They will tell me what my father had done. They will tell me the things that are important. One of the things that Heidi says is that here we are living in a time and in a world that matriarchal values still exist, and I would say absolutely yes. I would say that it really takes an awakening if it takes 5 minutes of breath work to actually have the presence of mind to really find the place in yourself that is woman. Because the woman has the answer. The woman is not questioning, am I woman? The woman just knows. Tacit knowledge. It's survival. It's exciting. It's chaotic. It's so menstrual. It's so awesome. It's so menopausal. It's like frighteningly, awesomely woman. So decolonization is sort of stripping away all of this separating, compartmentalizing that patriarchy does to us. It recognizes that we all have something to forgive, and we all have people to forgive us. We need to actually take a stand, not just for myself and my own history. Because in the Filipino culture, the difference between what I realize in Western culture and Filipino culture, the culture I come from, we stand for children. In the Dianic tradition, Z Budapest, for those of you who know that crazy witch, Z Budapest is most often quoted as saying, there are only two kinds of people in the world, mother and their children. Because every man is born of a mother. So in the Philippines, it's the same thing. Everyone works for the children. The matriarchal values I recognize were also in my cousins. Now, my mother was a twin. She was separated from her twin for probably close to 30 years. They'd been together for almost 30 years before she came to the United States. So for the first time, our families got to see each other. And by the time we got to see my first cousins, they all had children. What really surprised me was it wasn't the girls that took care of the babies, it was the boys. The teenage boys loved children so much, that we loved life so much, that we wanted to participate in the joyous expression of childlike behavior. On the island of Palawan that I mentioned earlier, where there's no word for war, the biggest magic that you can do is to act childlike. You act childlike to shame the person who is acting badly, to wake them up. Because certainly, how could you do this to a child? How could you treat a child like this? Why would you speak to a child like this? We speak to children in the ways that we hope children will be adults. We treat children in the way that we hope children will love. So that I, as a child, a woman of 55, I'm a child of my own mother, I'm still a child. But it's my responsibility as a priestess and a Babaylan, and the reason that I'm not talking much about the Babaylan, not only do I not have enough time, I want to invite you. The Babaylan in the Philippines was part of the leadership structure. There was what was called a datu. We were in clan systems, and we were in barangay systems, so there were city systems, but there was always a leader. And the leadership model had about 3 or 4 different things. One was the datu, who was like the leader, the social leader. There was another one who they call them the panday, which were like the guilds So they headed up all the different crafts and things. And then there was the Babaylan. They also had a military, sort of somebody who took care of the laws or just made sure when there was a fight